So I think they may stay a little bit lower instead of going too high, but who knows? It's SpaceX. Elon might say, and this one's going, to Timbuktu or somewhere. I don't know.
But you know what today really did demonstrate, honestly, is why, it's very rare for rockets to catch fire in their operational state, but it does happen sometimes. And that's why when you see those things happen, why we get really, really nervous, because that's what can happen in the blink of an eye. I remember,
Yeah.
was it last year, Thomas, that the H-2B caught fire on the pad at Tanegashima?
Last
Yes.
year or 2 years ago. I think it might have been 2 years
Yeah.
ago. One for the
Yeah, and that was
ISS.
even more like heart stopping because it was hydrogen involved. But luckily that did not lead to an explosion somehow. But yeah, that's why whenever you see that, we get really, really nervous and know, yeah, we should stick with this.
Yeah.
You can see on Fleet Cam right now that we can see one of the fairing catchers there, but actually both of the normal dedicated fairing catchers are in port currently as they continue to make some potential modifications. They've removed both of those back arms, and we'll see what changes they make. But Go Navigator and Go Searcher, the two Dragon recovery vessels, are filling in and are positioned downrange to recover the fairings from the water for this mission.
Also, quick clarification of the overlay there. We are at the KSC press site because we are at 39A. We are not at the ITEL Causeway. Sometimes we forget to switch that between launches.
Yeah.
Just clarifying that, but we are here at the Kennedy Space Center for pad 39A for today. One of SpaceX's two pads. Interestingly enough, and I can say this because we're here, at 39B, just to our left, the pad that will play future home to SLS, all of the pad xenons are on, so maybe doing some work. Well, they can't be working on it right now because they'd be in the exclusion zone. So I don't know why all those lights are on, but it looks kind of cool. And then they've also got the lights on over at Slick 40, which is SpaceX's other pad. So lots of cool pad xenon lights on around the Space Center tonight.
Couple more questions. Do we know if the first stage exploded in flight or crashed into the ocean during the previous Starlink landing?
I believe our best guess, obviously we have very limited information and sort of footage of this, but I believe our best guess was it was mostly burning and or falling apart shortly after that entry burn. We saw a lot of plasma in the final frames of that landing attempt, and then the small amount of footage we did get from the drone ship on that attempt showed a sort of a faint glow of something burning on the way down rather than the ignition of Merlin engines for a landing burn. So that kind of suggests that the entry burn is where all that damage, or right after the entry burn is where that damage took place, and the booster was likely not fully intact from that point forward. So probably during the descent is where the stage encountered its issues.
We just saw a quick view of the drone ship there, and it looked like there were no signals on
We are just under 8.5 minutes until liftoff, and leading into tonight's launch, the chief engineer held a technical poll at the T-1 hour mark, and then the launch director held a propellant load and launch go-no-go poll at the T-38-minute mark. Since then, Falcon 9 has been loading propellants since the T-35-minute mark. The vehicle uses two types of propellant, a fuel and an oxidizer. For fuel, we use a refined form of kerosene called RP1, and for its oxidizer, we use super chilled liquid oxygen. We also refer to it as LOX. Currently, RP1 is fully loaded on the second stage and nearly fully loaded on the first stage. And as for liquid oxygen, we're loading it right now on both stages. We also load helium to the vehicle, and that began before the webcast went live. We'll continue to top it off until about a minute and a half before launch. And we use this helium to maintain pressure in the tanks as propellant is consumed throughout the mission. In about 25 seconds, engine chill will begin. This is where we allow a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen to flow into the Merlin engine's turbopumps prior to the full flow of LOX to avoid any thermal shocks to the system. Around the T-5 minute and 13-second mark, checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators will begin. This is also known as the engine wiggle test. We'll initiate these slight movements to make sure that the guidance hardware is a go for flight. The first stage engines also perform the same exact engine wiggle test, and this happens just seconds before ignition. The vehicle is healthy. We are currently working, no issues. The range is standing by and currently green for liftoff. The weather is also green for today's mission. All systems continue to be go for a liftoff at 3:24 a.m. Eastern Time.
Now, Starlink was designed to help meet the growing need for truly high-speed, low-latency broadband to underserved and unserved areas. One key advantage of Starlink is the ability to deploy the system quickly. The Starlink kit contains everything that a user needs to get connected to the internet, and once they have a kit in hand, users can be connected in a matter of minutes.
Stage 1 RP1
For many communities that historically have had poor or non-existent access to the internet, the impacts of the current pandemic have made day-to-day life even more challenging. One such community is the Wise County Public School District in rural Virginia. Now, when COVID forced schools to close and resort to remote education, the community did not have the connectivity it needed to support distance learning for its students. According to a survey conducted by the school district, 40% of teachers and families in the area had limited to no access to internet. In December, the Wise County Public School District announced its plan to provide some families in the area with free Starlink service to promote remote learning. In January, we deployed the Starlink units to the community, and now over 40 homes are now connected with service. We are currently delivering beta service both domestically and internationally, and the team will continue to push towards near global coverage of the populated world in 2021. If you're interested in bringing Starlink to your home or your community, you can head over to starlink.com for more information.
We are currently 5 minutes from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. We're currently waiting for the Transport Erector, or TE, to retract away from Falcon 9. The Transport Erector is that white painted structure right next to the vehicle. In about 40 seconds, the clamp arms at the top of the vehicle will begin to open, and then the strong back will begin to recline away around the T-3 minute and 39-second mark, and it will recline away about 2 degrees from Falcon 9 to its pre-launch position.
Strong backflow has begun.
And you're hearing the callouts that we're beginning that process. The strong back won't fully reach that pre-launch position until about the T-3 minute and 4-second mark. The Transport Erector has a few jobs. It provides liquids, gases, electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload fairing. And on screen right now, you can see the clamp arms are starting to retract away from, to open up and prepare the Transport Erector to recline away from Falcon 9. This entire process should take about another 40 seconds or so. The first and second stages are both nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. The first stage should finish propellant loading around the T-3 minute mark, and the second stage should finish around the T-2 minute mark. And there goes the strong back beginning to recline away from Falcon 9 to its pre-launch position about 2 degrees from the vehicle. And as we get closer to T0 at T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 is in startup. And this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. We'll then light the Merlin engines around the T-minus 2 second mark. We use TTEB as our ignition fluid, and when it mixes with oxygen, it burns a green colored flame. We then allow the fuel into the thrust chamber, and the engine comes to power for liftoff at T0. The Starlink payload continues to be healthy. The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather, again, remains good, and the range is also green for launch. And if you're just joining us, this is the 20th Starlink mission for SpaceX and the 6th mission overall in 2021. In just a few seconds here, we should hear the call out that LOX loading has completed on the second stage, and that will wrap up propellant loading for the entire vehicle for today's mission.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And there is that call out. You can start to hear some hissing and notice some white clouds around Falcon 9. That is normal for us at this stage in the countdown. We are venting liquid oxygen through the transport erector lines, and we'll continue to do so all the way down until T0.
Falcon 9's in startup.
We are in startup. Both stages are now beginning to pressurize for launch. In a few seconds here, we should hear the launch director give the final go for launch.
Falcon 9, Starlink, LDs go for launch.
And there's the final go for launch. Let's listen in to terminal count and watch as Falcon 9 takes our stack of Starlink satellites into orbit.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
T plus 40 seconds into flight. It is dark, but we can definitely hear Falcon 9. We have successfully lifted off from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, carrying our stack of Starlink satellites into orbit. Right now, we're currently throttling down the engines in preparation for max Q. That is the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure, where we'll experience the largest structural load on the vehicle during ascent. So slowing the vehicle down helps during this period.
Max Q.
And there is the call out for max Q. We've just passed the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure on Falcon 9. In about a minute, we have 3 events happening back to back. First up is main engine cutoff, also known as MECO. This is where all 9 Merlin engines on the first stage will shut off to slow the vehicle down in preparation for the second event, which is stage separation. During stage separation, the first and second stage will separate from one another, with the first stage starting to make its way back to Earth for a landing attempt on our drone ship, while the second stage continues its journey with the third event, Second Engine Start 1, also known as SES-1. During Second Engine Start 1, this is where we'll light the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage and propel the second stage along with the Starlink satellites into orbit. The first event, MECO, should be happening in about 25 seconds. And there's an animation of where Falcon 9 is currently at, just heading east from the coast of Florida.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
INVAC ignition.
And you saw the visuals on screen. The first stage separated from the second stage, making its way back to Earth. And we have a beautiful startup of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. Coming up in a few seconds here is fairing deploy.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And off goes the fairing halves, exposing the batch of Starlink satellites on top of the second stage. As a reminder, we will be attempting to recover the fairing halves today with our recovery ships Go Searcher and Go Navigator.
Now, after that beautiful launch that we just barely couldn't see, Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit. Stage 1 is going to execute 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite, and this will help slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn is the landing burn. Now, this is a single engine burn that will bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
You can see in that video there that our second stage is looking good. Its nozzle is glowing from that burn that it's currently in. And again, our second stage is carrying our 60 Starlink satellites to LEO, or low Earth orbit. That's about 550 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. For reference, most satellites are actually in GEO, or geostationary orbit, which is over 1,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. And the reason that we have our Starlink satellites in this lower orbit is that it reduces the round trip time that it takes for data to travel between the user and the satellite, reducing what is known as latency and improving performance in activities like video calls and online gaming. And again, you can't quite see the first stage, but it is coasting down, getting ready for the start of entry burn in about 40 seconds here. It is coasting using its 4 hypersonic grid fins and the occasional burst of nitrogen gas from its attitude control system. Again, if you're just joining us, we had a successful liftoff. Our first stage is returning, getting ready for its entry burn in 10 seconds here, and then our second stage is
safed.
Looking good with our Starlink satellites.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
You heard the call out for stage 1 entry burn startup. Again, the entry burn will last about 20 seconds here.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
We've had confirmation of a successful stage 1 entry burn. And if you've been following SpaceX news, this is actually the second landing that we're attempting in the past 12 hours.
Continue to follow nominal trajectories.
The first one being our Starship serial number 10, which successfully landed in South Texas just earlier this afternoon. And again, our first stage is designed to be reflown 10 or more times with minimal refurbishment between flights, and this is the 8th flight that this particular first stage has been on. In comparison with Starship, our Starship vehicle is designed to be fully reusable. Second stage continues to look good. And we are less than 30 seconds now from the start of our landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn startup.
You heard the call out for our start of landing burn. This will be about 20 seconds. Hopefully we'll get a great video from our drone ship. Of course, I still love you. You can see it there on your left.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Stage 2 FTS is safed.
Looks like we've briefly lost the video. Hopefully we can get a confirmation here soon about whether or not the first stage has successfully landed. Meanwhile, second stage is still looking good. We did just have confirmation of our successful stage 1 landing. This will mark our 75th successful recovery of an orbital class rocket, the 8th recovery of this particular booster, and our second landing in the past 12 hours. Again, this is the second time that we've recovered a booster for the 8th time. And in just a few seconds here, you're going to hear the call out for, well, we just had a call out for SECO 1, in fact, for our second stage, and a confirmation for a good